What if the two beasts of Revelation 13 are not the Roman Catholic Church? What if the first beast represents a political government, the second beast represents another political government that supports it, and Mystery Babylon the harlot is a completely different entity? That is the possibility I want to explore in this video. This is not being presented as a proven interpretation of prophecy. It is a theory, a proposed model, that attempts to put several pieces of Revelation and Daniel together. Some pieces may appear to fit remarkably well, other pieces remain unresolved, and some questions may only be answered by future events. So rather than assuming we already know the answer, I want to ask, do these pieces actually fit the biblical text? And if they do, how might they fit together? In the historicist interpretation of Revelation, the first beast has traditionally been associated with the papacy, the Roman Catholic Church considered as a religious and political institution. In that interpretation, the deadly wound is commonly connected with the events of 1798, when French General Louis-Alexandre Berthier entered Rome and Pope Pius VI was taken prisoner. The later recovery of papal influence is then interpreted as the healing of the wound. That interpretation has a long history and deserves to be treated fairly. But there is a question I believe deserves serious consideration. Does that event correspond to the scale of the deadly wound described in Revelation? Revelation 13:3. One of his heads looked like it had been wounded fatally. His fatal wound was healed. The whole earth marveled at the beast. The alternative theory asks whether Jerusalem and Israel, considered as a political entity, provide a closer historical correspondence. The theory points to the destruction of Jerusalem, centuries of dispersion and persecution, the Holocaust, and the establishment of the modern state of Israel in 1948 as a possible wound and restoration pattern. This is an argument for consideration, not proof. Revelation 13 does not describe one beast performing every action. It introduces two beasts. The first beast receives authority and is connected with the deadly wound. The second beast exercises authority in connection with the first and causes the inhabitants of the earth to give allegiance to the first. Revelation 13:11-12 says, I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon. He exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence. He causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. Notice the relationship. The second beast exercises authority in the presence of the first and directs attention toward the first beast. Under this theory, the first beast is examined as a possible representation of the government of Israel, while the second beast is examined as a possible representation of the government of the United States. The reason for considering America is not simply that America is powerful. The argument is based on the role of the second beast. It supports the first, exercises extraordinary influence, and becomes involved in the economic and allegiance system described in Revelation 13. The United States has enormous military, economic, technological, diplomatic, and cultural influence, and it has maintained a particularly significant relationship with Israel. The current relationship between the United States and Israel does not by itself prove the identification. Future developments could strengthen the theory, weaken it, or show that it is wrong. The theory therefore watches rather than declares. The harlot is not the beast. Now we reach what may be the most important distinction in the entire theory. The beast and the harlot are not necessarily the same entity. Revelation 17:3-5 says, He carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet-colored beast, full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, and was adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead a name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of the prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. The woman is riding the beast. They are connected, but they are distinguishable. Revelation 17:16 says, The 10 horns which you saw, and the beast, these will hate the prostitute, and will make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh, and will burn her utterly with fire. If the beast ultimately turns against and destroys the harlot, then the two symbols cannot simply be treated as identical in every sense. They are intertwined. They cooperate. The harlot rides the beast, but eventually the beast turns against her. Rome and Mystery Babylon. This theory proposes Rome, but not Rome in the narrow sense of only the Vatican or only the modern Roman Catholic Church. Here, Rome is being used in a broader historical and civilizational sense. Ancient Rome, the Roman Empire, the Christianized Roman world, Christian Europe, and eventually the broader Western civilization that inherited many Roman institutions and traditions. Revelation 17 gives several clues that have historically led interpreters toward Rome. The 7 mountains, kings, wealth, political influence, and the great city exercising influence over rulers of the earth. The harlot, the bride, and spiritual unfaithfulness. Why would Revelation use the imagery of an unfaithful woman? Because the Bible repeatedly uses marriage imagery for the relationship between God and his people. The harlot is a symbolic picture of unfaithfulness, while the bride is a picture of faithfulness. This does not mean every individual within a civilization or church is unfaithful to God. A civilization can contain faithful believers and corrupt institutions. A church can contain genuine believers and nominal believers. Matthew 13:29-30 reads as follows. But he said, No, lest while you gather up the tares, you also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of harvest I will say to the reapers, First gather together the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. The point for this theory is not to call a particular population wheat or tares. The point is that genuine believers and false believers can exist together until God's final judgment. Therefore, the same civilization can contain people who belong spiritually to Christ, while the institutions surrounding them may be represented by Babylonian imagery. This is why the theory distinguishes government, civilization, and individual people. America becomes especially interesting when we separate 3 levels. First, the American government. Under this theory, it is examined as a possible second beast. Second, American civilization. It is part of the broader Western civilization that this theory examines as a possible continuation of the Roman Western inheritance represented by Mystery Babylon. Third, the American people. They are not treated as one prophetic category. They are a mixed multitude of people with different beliefs, including genuine followers of Christ. America and New Jerusalem. There is another question. Could America have a symbolic connection with New Jerusalem? Some early American religious movements used biblical imagery to describe America as a promised land or New Jerusalem, but the New Jerusalem of Revelation 21 is ultimately a heavenly city that comes down from God. It should not simply be equated with modern America. Revelation 21:2 says, I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared like a bride adorned for her husband. A more careful proposal is that individual believers within America can belong to Christ and ultimately to the bride, while the civilization around them may simultaneously contain Babylonian characteristics. Again, government, civilization, and people are distinct categories. Daniel and the Roman connection. Revelation's beast imagery is deeply connected to Daniel. Daniel describes kingdoms as beasts and gives us the famous image of successive kingdoms in Daniel chapter 2. Many Christian interpreters identify the 4th kingdom with Rome. This theory explores whether Rome's influence could have continued through later Christian Europe and the broader Western civilization, rather than simply disappearing. But this is one of the areas where the theory remains incomplete. A responsible theory should leave unresolved questions open rather than forcing an answer. The 42 months. Revelation 13:5 says, A mouth speaking great things, and blasphemy was given to him. Authority was given to him to make war for 42 months. The final authority of the beast is limited. 42 months is 3.5 years. Therefore, the theory does not require the beast to possess complete worldwide control today. It allows for the possibility of an escalating political power that reaches its greatest authority only during a final period. Whether that corresponds to future events remains unknown. Babylon's destruction and Christ's return. The beast and the harlot are intertwined. The harlot rides the beast. The beast eventually turns against the harlot and destroys her. Revelation 19:19-20 says, "I saw the beast, the kings of the earth, and their armies gathered together to make war against him who sat on the horse and against his army. The beast was taken, and with him the false prophet who did the signs in his presence, with which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur." This raises an intriguing possibility within the theory. Perhaps the beast's political program never reaches the complete domination it seeks because Christ returns and ends it. I also noticed something. The armies came to make war against Jesus, not Israel. Jesus is the entity that comes on the white horse. Keep that in mind. The bride and New Jerusalem. The story ultimately ends not with Babylon, not with the beast, and not with any earthly government. It ends with the bride. Revelation 21:9-10 says, "One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls, which are filled with the 7 last plagues, came and spoke with me, saying, 'Come here, I will show you the wife, the Lamb's bride.' He carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. The harlot is destroyed, the beast is defeated, the enemies of God are judged, and the bride is revealed." That gives us the ultimate contrast, Babylon the harlot versus New Jerusalem the bride. What could confirm or disprove the theory? Would the relationship between the United States and Israel develop into something resembling the relationship between the two beasts? Would Israel's political role increasingly correspond to the characteristics of the first beast? Would the United States exercise the kind of authority attributed to the second beast? Would a recognizable Roman Western civilizational system correspond increasingly to the characteristics of Babylon? Would Babylon eventually be destroyed by the political powers that benefited from her? Would the beast's final authority correspond to the limited period described in Revelation? These questions cannot simply be answered by speculation today. They have to be tested against Scripture and observed as history unfolds. Unresolved pieces. What exactly are the 7 heads? Who or what are the 10 horns? How precisely does Daniel's 4th kingdom connect with modern Western civilization? What exactly is the relationship between ancient Rome, Christian Europe, and modern America? How does the economic system of Revelation 13 develop? What exactly does the mark of the beast represent? How does the 42-month period unfold? And most importantly, will future events actually confirm the proposed identifications? We don't know. And that is okay. A responsible theory acknowledges where Scripture is clear, where interpretation begins, and where questions remain. Final summary. Here are the classifications to consider. First beast? The government of Israel, a possible correspondence with the deadly wound and subsequent restoration. The second beast? The U.S. government, a possible political power that supports and empowers the first beast. Mystery Babylon, or the harlot. Rome understood broadly as the Roman Christian Western civilizational inheritance, a religious and civilizational power that rides the beast and is eventually destroyed by the beast. The people? A mixed multitude. The wheat and tares are growing together until the harvest. The bride? The redeemed people of God, ultimately represented by the New Jerusalem. And finally, the king? He's Jesus Christ, of course. The beast does not win. Babylon does not win. Political power does not get the final word. Jesus does.